In the prosperous Dutch Golden Age of the 1630s, merchants haggled in busy harbors, artists painted in well-lit studios, and citizens admired exotic flowers, unaware of the financial storm about to break. On a crisp morning in Amsterdam, the air was thick with the scent of salt, tobacco, and freshly baked bread, and the canals reflected the city's pride like mirrors of silver. The day began with the familiar rhythm of commerce, the clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestones, the shout of porters, and the steady hum of traders who believed the world belonged to them. In the markets, a single bulb could command more attention than a piece of fine silk, and a rare tulip was treated as if it were a jewel from the farthest reaches of the world. Few could imagine that the same flower they admired would soon be at the center of a craze so intense it would change the lives of ordinary people, pushing them into debt, desperation, and ruin. As the city moved with confident energy, there was no hint of the collapse that would arrive like a sudden winter storm, leaving behind a silence that would haunt the canals for years to come. That morning, Amsterdam's streets were alive with the orderly chaos of a city that had grown rich through trade, innovation, and the promise of the future. Sailors from distant lands mingled with Dutch citizens, their clothes telling stories of voyages to the East Indies and beyond. In the merchant houses, ledgers were opened, ink was dipped, and decisions were made with a calm certainty that came from years of profit. Yet beneath this calm, there was a new kind of excitement, one that moved faster than ships and louder than bells, a quiet fever that had begun to spread through the city like a whisper in a crowded room. People spoke of tulips not as flowers, but as fortunes, and the names of rare varieties traveled from one canal-side cafe to another as if they were precious secrets. In the upper floors of townhouses, women arranged bouquets with a care that bordered on reverence, while men debated the value of a single bulb as if it were a share in a company. The tulip was no longer merely a plant, it had become a symbol of status, a token of wealth, and a promise of something greater than ordinary life. By midday, the market in the heart of Amsterdam was a living organism, and the tulip trade was its heartbeat. Buyers and sellers gathered in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones as they negotiated prices that would have seemed insane only a few years earlier. A single bulb of the rarest kind could be traded for the equivalent of a comfortable house, and yet the crowd moved as if such numbers were normal. The tulip, imported from faraway lands and cultivated through painstaking care, had become a luxury that the Dutch could not resist, and the demand only grew stronger with each passing day. People who had never owned more than a small shop or a modest boat were now making deals with the confidence of seasoned financiers. The city's wealth was not just in its warehouses and docks, but in the soil beneath its gardens, where these delicate flowers were nurtured into symbols of ambition. The air in the market was filled with the sound of laughter, the clink of coins, and the quiet satisfaction of those who believed they were part of a new age of prosperity. As the afternoon moved on, the conversations in Amsterdam began to shift from simple trade to something more complex, a sense that the city was entering a new era of speculation. In the homes of the middle class, families spoke about tulips with the same seriousness as they might discuss marriage or inheritance. A young man might be praised for buying a bulb at the right moment, and an old man might shake his head, warning of the dangers of putting too much trust in something as fragile as a flower. Yet even those warnings were often ignored, drowned out by the excitement of the moment. The tulip had become a story people told about themselves, a proof of their cleverness and their ability to see value where others could not. It was a time when the future seemed certain, when the city's wealth was believed to be endless, and the idea of a collapse felt as impossible as the idea of the canals drying up. The people of Amsterdam lived as if every day would bring more prosperity, and the tulip trade was the most visible sign of that belief. By evening, the city's mood had shifted from bustling energy to quiet confidence, as if everyone believed they had already won the day. In the taverns and coffee houses, traders counted their profits, and the tulip's beauty seemed to glow even more in the soft light of candles and lamps. The flower had become a subject of poetry, art, and conversation, and the excitement around it had turned into a kind of shared dream. People spoke of the tulip's colors as if they were describing the future itself, each shade representing a different promise of wealth. In the upper floors of townhouses, women arranged bouquets with a care that bordered on reverence, while men debated the value of a single bulb as if it were a share in a company. The tulip was no longer merely a plant, it had become a symbol of status, a token of wealth, and a promise of something greater than ordinary life. The city seemed to be held in a gentle, unshakable belief that nothing could go wrong, that the world would continue to reward them for their boldness. But in the quiet corners of Amsterdam, some began to feel a subtle unease, a small doubt that perhaps the tulip's value was not as stable as it appeared, a thought quickly dismissed by those who preferred the comfort of certainty over the discomfort of caution. As night fell over Amsterdam, the city's canals shimmered under the soft glow of lanterns, and the sound of laughter and conversation drifted through the streets like a comforting melody. In the homes of the wealthy, families gathered around tables heavy with food and wine, their voices filled with pride and the easy confidence of those who believed the future was already secured. In one of these houses, a merchant sat with his wife discussing the tulip bulbs he had bought earlier that day, his tone calm and assured, as if speaking about a normal, everyday purchase. He spoke of the rare varieties he had acquired, the prices he had paid, and the profit he expected to earn. His wife listened with a smile, her eyes reflecting the pride of a family that had risen in status through trade. They spoke not of the risk, but of the excitement of being part of something bigger than themselves, a new world where even a flower could create wealth beyond imagination. In the nearby streets, servants moved quietly, closing shutters and preparing for sleep, unaware that the next days would test the very foundation of their city's confidence. In the quieter parts of Amsterdam, the tulip craze had reached into the lives of people who were not wealthy, who had never imagined they would participate in the world of speculation. A young craftsman working late in his small workshop had spent his savings on a bulb he believed would bring him a fortune. He had heard the stories of men who had changed their lives overnight, and he wanted the same chance. His friends had warned him, but the dream was too strong, the promise too tempting. He thought of his family, of the small house he hoped to improve, and he believed the tulip could be his ticket to a better life. The bulb sat on his windowsill, a small object of delicate beauty, and he stared at it with a mix of hope and anxiety. He could not fully explain why he felt so certain that the value would rise, but the city itself seemed to be telling him that it would. In the distance, the sound of church bells echoed, a reminder of the world's stability. Yet the craftsman's mind was already drifting into the future, imagining the moment when he would sell the bulb and the world would change for him. Across the canal, a farmer who had recently moved to the city found himself swept up in the excitement as well. He had sold his land to come to Amsterdam, believing the city offered opportunities that the countryside could not. Now he heard of tulips being sold for prices that made no sense to him, and yet he felt the pull of the possibility. He thought of his children, of the life he wanted to provide, and he began to consider whether he should invest. In his mind, the tulip represented more than money. It represented a new identity, a chance to become part of the city's story. He imagined himself walking through the market, holding a rare bulb, and being respected by those who once looked down on him. The idea of belonging was powerful, and it was one of the unseen forces driving the tulip craze. People were not only buying flowers, they were buying a place in a society that valued wealth and status above all else. In the quiet of his room, the farmer made a decision that would bind him to the market's fate, unaware that the dream he was chasing was already beginning to wobble. In the early hours of the morning, the city remained calm, but the first signs of change were already present, subtle enough that most people would miss them. In the marketplace, a few traders began to hesitate, their voices softer, their confidence slightly shaken. They spoke of small delays, of buyers who were suddenly unavailable, of prices that were no longer rising as quickly as they had been. These were not dramatic signs, just minor disruptions that could easily be explained away. Yet in the world of speculation, even a small doubt can grow quickly, like a crack in a dam that slowly widens until the water rushes through. The tulip trade had become so dependent on belief that any sign of uncertainty could spread like a contagion. And so, as the day began, the city moved with its usual energy, but underneath, the first tremors of the coming collapse were already moving through the market, quiet and almost invisible, waiting for the moment when the dream would begin to unravel.